I'm gonna do the votes next meeting. I figured for this one, I'm gonna try to get a speaker live. Fiscal year break, right? Ryan? We have a clock now, so we're just gonna time everybody down. Hey, we keep dwindling here. We used to at least have a couple people in the crowd. Take your time, relax. So we've heard. Yeah, that's fine. All right. I'll call the meeting to order at 5:01 p.m. And Kate, can you call the roll, please? Here.
All right, Luke Murray. Danielle DeSimone.
Here.
Ryan Cilia.
Here.
Brian Mahoney. Here. Chip Aguirre.
Here.
Kate, I am here. And Dave Palizzetti. And Jim Manny is going to be here. He's a few moments late.
Perfect. Thanks, Kate. Move on to approval of meeting minutes. So we have a whole smorgasbord, 8 meeting minutes to approve. Hopefully everyone had a chance to click on the link to the Secretary of State site to see the draft. So we'll be calling, does anyone have any questions or revisions to the minutes? Okay, is everyone clear to move forward?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll ask for a motion to approve the meetings from the meeting minutes from the following dates: December 8th, 2022, February 9th, 2023, May 4th, 2023, March 30th, 2023, March 16th, 2023, December 15th, 2022, February 2nd, 2023, and February 16th, 2023.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Brian. Can I get a second? Call it Chip. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Yep.
Okay, so we have one abstention.
Made the motion. And who's second? Chip second.
To Chip on the second. And then we have one abstention. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. So, Kate, can you coordinate with the school, with Terry, or whoever, to bring those from draft to
Got it.
finals? Perfect. Thank you. New business items. I haven't received any correspondence this period. It's been relatively quiet. I think people are kind of in summer mode. So I'll keep tabs. One thing I did want to bring up is, as you all know, I'm going to kind of pull back a little bit. One of the things we'll be talking to the owner's project manager is how to delegate different responsibilities and move some over to them. But one of the things with correspondence, I'm currently getting them and aggregating them. I don't know if that's the best format. It's the format we created. We could have it so the email gets distributed to the entire committee, but no responses. It doesn't have to be decided tonight, but I just want everyone to think about, like, as we get closer, we may get more correspondence. And it's typically been falling on me to aggregate everything, and it takes a little bit of time, right? So,
May I give a suggestion?
sure.
Instead of having it be an email, is it possible that we could change the way we collect it to be a form, like a Google form, and then it automatically gets put into a repository that everybody can access?
So I think yes, and what we may also be able to do is the OPM is going to be obligated to provide a new website. We could create a form right on the website that's form fillable. They hit submit and it comes to the committee. So that way it's, now as far as distribution, it would still have to get converted in the email form, or it'd have to go into some repository to view, whether it be like an FTP site or something where everyone can get at it. So we can discuss that.
I mean, because Google Forms dump into a repository to review, and
Sure.
so that would be, to me, the easiest, but like I said, if the OPM had a different mechanism, we could do that. But it just would make it easier than having to compile and share out, and that way everybody can access from
Central
our
source.
committee instead of disseminating it out.
I support the idea. I think we can work out the details later.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's something we can bring up with the OPM. I mean, in premise, we want to have a central repository, all comments go in, we all have access to it as opposed to pushing everything out. Got it. All right, perfect. Any other questions on the correspondence item? Comments? No? All right, good. Moving on, item number 4, Chairperson's General Correspondence and Ongoing Activities Report. So I put some of this in email form. I'll repeat a little bit here, not only for the benefit for us, for anyone who watches the video. So on June 12th, Governor McKee signed Senate Bill 994 and House Bill 6276, which authorized the town to issue general obligation bonds subject to a referendum. I'll put that caveat on there. One thing that I'd need to do next week is to draft a memo to the town council to request that they hold that referendum. And that way we'll get the approval, hopefully, well in advance, and we'll have it solidified that on November 7th, we'll be moving forward to a referendum. There's a lot of things mechanically that the clerk's office has to do, just like they just did for this other referendum, is formulate the question specifically, submit it to Secretary of State, Board of Elections, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll be working on that on the town side. I'll make sure that all gets done. But it's good news. I think we're in progressive motion here. I had a meeting, I didn't have a meeting, I had a phone call with Chris Spiegel today from left field. So he called me a couple times trying to reach out. I did let him know that I had tuned into the school committee meeting, saw that they had approved to continue negotiations. I did inform him that we're still pending those negotiations, right, for fee. And that has to fall on, because the school committee approved with a fee to be negotiated. Their fee was already under what our budget is, but I am going to be reliant, and I have to talk to the school side, whoever the point of contact is going to be, is how that contract is going to get solidified and struck. So I'll be reaching out to try to do that, so that way left field is officially on board as our owner's project manager. In the meantime, I said I would sit down with him tomorrow to just give him background, effectively what we've been doing for the past year, where we're at now, so he has some background going into the project. I also urged him to, and I know he's working with Phil, I think up in North Providence, to reach out to Phil to also get background and context. So my goal for tomorrow, and Kate is vice chair, I don't know, are you still vice chair? You're bridging multiple roles.
Secretary,
But
coffee getter,
it's at one.
fails at her
There you
coffee
go.
getting.
Jack of all trades, right? You're welcome to sit, with me on that meeting, and if
When
you have
is it?
time, it's at 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock tomorrow.
Yeah, I know it's short notice. I just literally scheduled it 2 hours ago.
What kind of chair are you, Luke?
So the idea, just so the committee knows, it's not going to be anything new. It's just trying to get them caught up.
Where?
Here, my office. So if you can make it, that'd be great. All right, perfect. And that'll give them a jump start. We can also talk to them things like what we've talked about on the website, things like tonight about the correspondence. They already are well underway with some of that stuff, so I think they'll be turnkey. He did mention the fact that, the stage 2, we're moving along. And I said, we're not stopping the train. It's going. So they're going to have to play catch up with us on, and we'll try to get them to a point where they can do that. So any questions on that? All right, moving on. The 300th parade participation, I just want to give a shout out. Brian did a great job. He didn't hit anybody. Didn't veer off the road.
You didn't bounce me off the back. It was
Exactly.
awesome.
Even though one person did step in front of us going down High Street, someone stepped right in front of the truck.
Yep.
But we did not hit anyone, and it was a great time.
He just gave his wave.
Fell off.
Yep, he
Thank
gave
you.
his wave and kept
No.
walking in front of the truck.
It was excellent. And
Nope.
Nope.
Lots of cheers. Yep. Kate was good. Yep.
Kate was on the
Tons of
back.
positive feedback, lots of thumbs up, lots of cheering. You get a couple naysayers here and there, but that, we're supposed to.
Can't please everyone, but I think it was well received, and I think the ultimate goal was accomplished, which is let people know this is going on. And no matter how they want to get engaged, they know now that the project is there, they can get engaged. So, and to credit Phil and his team, they did an outstanding job with the banners. Those banners,
So awesome.
which leads me to, where are those banners, by the way, Brian?
It's been disassembled at the high school.
Okay.
All the wood and everything. We kept all the frames together. Those are in the wood shop, and then the banners or everything are inside the
All right.
building.
So I may reach out to Adam to see if I can pick those up and put them over in our garage just so they're in a controlled environment. And that way we can use them for future elsewhere. So if anyone has any ideas as time goes on where we can put those, they're obviously large. I think it's, 22 feet by 8 feet?
Did we keep them on the wooden frames?
No, we took them down off the frames. Because we do not have
We had
currently
to take them off the trailer.
that can put those on anything.
Yeah.
Just reattach to whatever, yeah.
Yeah. So we could do an independent exhibit, reattach all the walls, or we could attach it to a building side or whatever.
I think at one point we'd even talked about if it was plausible parking it in various places in town with permission.
Well, and that's kind of why I asked, so we still have the frame structure?
Oh yeah, it'll go right back on there. And I'll give Phil credit. Not many leaders of their companies would be out there, but Phil was out there with the drill gun doing it. When the CTE kids too.
Yeah,
So I
very
give Phil a lot of credit and the CTE kids. They were out there putting it all up there, and it was real hot that day.
Yeah, it was super.
So, but yeah, it goes right up. It screws in, screws up. But even with those, we were talking about too, if, opening of school, the first couple of weeks, and there's something in the auditorium, even if they're not on the wood frames, we could roll those out against the walls in the auditorium before you enter the auditorium, and, for just display pieces, or put them back on the wood. And, we have a lot of,
I mean, it would be, we could talk with the CTE group. They could make it like rollable or whatever, and you can move it around. It would just be a matter, we'd have to use I'm assuming we'd have to find a way to transport it.
They're pretty light box frames. They're essentially 2x4 box frames with corner supports, so they're very light. So the bottom line is for the school people at the table, if you can identify, and even on the town, the larger town side, we'll look broadly, but if there's things that are coming up, school-related, that you think, hey, could be there, let us know, and then we can make arrangements and we'll figure it out. Okay?
Luke, a couple of people asked, is that the exact school building, right? So
It's representative of the concept.
that's what I said. I said the final design has not truly been selected, but that is, the goal to have a school curb appeal like that. But I think if you're clear about that, 'cause some people are like, well, we didn't have any say in what it would look like, but, so that is a representative of what the
I also-
town would envision a high school.
I also would love to make sure it's clear that everybody had say, whether they chose to engage or not, but it is a concept rendering.
Right.
It's like when you go to a futuristic car show and you see a concept rendering of the Ferrari, it's obviously not going to be the Ferrari that's on the road, so
That's, like you said, there's a couple of people that asked that.
Yeah, no,
But
it's,
99% of them were very happy with
Yeah.
that in the parade.
there's still sausage to be made on this, so it'll get worked out in stage 3.
And I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves and bog things down, but just, I think one of the times where it would be worth having that back on a trailer and using it would be October 16th through the 21st. That's our whole Spirit Week, Ladies Dance, equivalent homecoming. I think there's a lot of different places that could be parked to just say like, hey, look at this. Yeah.
Who's gonna love me tying up the trailer that long?
and then possibly, it was just popped in my head too, at the beginning of the school year, with, if I do the math correct, I think the 8th grade class starting September would be the senior class for when this is built. So maybe start off the year with a display at Broad Rock showing, the 3 grade levels there. Hey, here's the future we're looking towards. So.
What's that? Yeah, that's true. All right. Anything else on that? Perfect. We'll be having more meetings leading up, so it would be helpful to identify a schedule. What's that? Yeah, I I translated it in my mind. All right, so we discussed last meeting that we'll be calling for a new chair. I'm not going to do it this meeting. The next meeting, which will be after the fiscal year, will be the call for votes for a new chair. So again, just give it some thought if you want to step up. I'd be remiss if I didn't put that out there. I think that's it. Any questions for me on that agenda item? All right, Phil, you got the show.
Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. We have a brief agenda, but I think there's a lot of important information to go over tonight. So we can update you on the ride stage 2 and answer any questions you may have on part 1 that was distributed for your review. I want to go over the cost estimate that we received and how that impacts the budget and give you an update on that, and then our schedule and next steps. So again, I went through this last time, but there are 10 parts to the stage 2 that we're working through. Part 1 is the project summary and prioritization, and that is the document that we suggest the school building committee makes their recommendation on submission. The school committee approves it for submission, and the town council reviews and approves that for submission, and it includes these items. And if you had a chance to go through that, I think that would have addressed all of these issues. Part 2, the feasibility study. All of these reports have been completed. Brian provided the radon reports this week, so that was very helpful. The schematic design documents, again, we are polishing these up for the submission to the school building authority. Again, just quickly familiarizing yourself with the project again, but this is not the schematic design documentation. This was just information for your review of the building that we had estimated. As well as the fields at Curtis Corner, not including that future field house. So part 4 is the design and construction cost projection, and it includes an estimate from our third-party cost estimator, PM&C out of Massachusetts. It also has the RIDE formula calculations, incentives, and the total project budget. So this is where we're going to spend a little bit of time this evening. So if you... Yes. So if you looked through the part 1, within the first page or so, you would have seen this chart. And we're going to go through this chart, and I want to explain it because I told you this is where the numbers could get a little confusing. If we start with the first line, the construction of the new South Kingstown High School at $100 million, that is formula driven. I'm going to show you how we got to that $100 million, but that's based on the RIDE formula. Then we have the construction of the new high school PE and athletic complex. We had that at about $8 million. The estimate we came back with a higher number, so we're going to be revising that number, and I'll show you what that is. The remaining line items were developed from the facility condition assessment that we did, and those are really placeholders for work that we want to include in the stage 2 that you would be eligible for reimbursement. And that totaled here at $133,553,825. All right? Now, people are going to wonder, but town council authorized the bond vote up to $125 million. Why don't these numbers match what's in the RIDE Stage 2 proposal? So we're going to walk through that. The first one is, I want to show you this budget format that's based on the RIDE formula and how we get to that first number I showed you of about $100 million. All right, first, we had to identify the number of students for the high school. We are submitting 725 students. That's based on the NESDEC demographics, as well as anticipated retentions that we are making an argument for. The RISE School Building Authority could very easily say, you're not building a high school for 725, you're only going to build it for 675 because that's what the demographics may show. But we're trying to make a case for more students. Because that increases the amount of funding, yes.
Reading the report, I think you made a very strong case for it. I think you guys did a good job actually showing the 758 number and then backing into the 725. So I think we've got a good support for that. I'm hoping RIDE agrees, but I appreciate the analysis your team did.
Sure, thank you. And we'll have a time, there will be a supplemental, right? RIDE will take this, they will generate a list of questions, and then they'll ask us to go back and forth. After you have established the student enrollment, that directly relates to the allowable size that your high school could be. So based on 725 students, the maximum eligible square footage of that building is about 154,000 square feet. You can build more, and I do not want to get into the technicalities of the auditorium right now, but you could build more, it's just not eligible for reimbursement. So based on that square footage of 154,000, they allocate $589 a square foot. So when you do the math, you get about $90 million. That's the hard costs. Then there are a series of soft costs and other costs. And if you look at the very bottom, that's how you get to the $100,553,825 that we have. This is what we expect RIDE to consider eligible for reimbursement, right? They have mechanisms to make that lower. They can unilaterally make it lower, as they did in other communities. That is our target, based on the formula and based upon the arguments that we've made. We talked many times that that was already insufficient, which is why we had promoted a higher amount. Our current size that we've designed, we're about 150,000 square feet. And for reference, Rogers High School is about 765 students at 170,000 square feet. And that makes sense. They have a bigger CTE program with some bigger spaces like culinary, and obviously they have more students. So we feel that 150,000 is the right range, but similarly to Rogers and other communities, you may have to scale that down in stage 3 as you progress the design. The PE and athletic fields, it's not formula driven, right? We develop an estimate and RIDE will review it with their estimators and say, yeah, we agree, or no, we don't agree, or provide us additional information to justify your number. And at this time, we had 8 million as a placeholder, but the estimates have revealed that it's a higher cost, and I'll show you that. Jim, I remember we talked a few months ago, we thought 6 million wasn't enough. We moved it to 8 million, and it's yet more.
I have a question for you, just as I'm looking at these. First question is, you're involved in other schools that you've built in the region. So a school of about this size, what was the true actual cost at the end of, what do you expect it to be like right now at the end per square foot?
So if you could go back several presentations, and I think that you'll see that we were targeting about $850 a square foot. Other than East Providence High School, which you really can't use that as a benchmark because it was absolutely done during COVID, where the construction cost, they caught lightning in a bottle there. You'll never be able to get that much building for that cost. Your comparable right now is Rogers High School, which is under construction, which I relate to a little bit in the presentation.
The reason I bring that up, there was a building I was involved in coming up with the idea, starting getting cost estimates, design, and so forth. It was a barracks on Route 95. We budgeted about $1,000 a foot. At the time, the estimates were about $850 a foot. That was with the contingency. Just checking in now, it's well over $1,500 to build that same facility. I don't know, I'm not a builder, so I'm sure barracks has different
Sure.
needs that, you know, I would imagine there's definitely different needs there, but we look at just building a house now is well over $500 a foot. So you think that these estimates are truly doable for a 140,000 square foot building? Is that what?
150. You're going to see that I have some comparisons here coming up. This is the 25 million that we are submitting just for eligibility. This is the work either at Hazard or the other elementary and middle school projects. And we basically identified a $25 million bucket of projects at all of those locations. So that's how we've come up with that one. This is typically not argued because it's just based on deferred maintenance projects. Now, this is the cost estimate. This is just one sheet of the cost estimate, but I want to walk through this and show you how we're developing it. So, I mean, if you look at the top, first thing, they're at 150,081 square feet. Okay, so we got the right building that they're estimating. This is just hard cost. Hard cost of the building is about 71 million. The PE and athletic fields are coming in at about 11 million. I crossed out the lines that they had for demolition and hazardous material abatement for two reasons. One, you'll look in our project budget form that I'm going to walk you through. That is a line that is already carried lower, so I didn't want to include it in here. And we think that that number is not accurate. We feel that is not all-inclusive. So we're working with our estimator to get that number revised. Then there are the general requirements, which is the cost of contracting to do this project, and then site work, which is about $10 million. So if you subtotal all of that hard cost, you get to $97,136,000. I subtracted that demolition number, 1.2 million, because that is not accurate number. And I get a hard cost of $95,888,600. Everything below that, I do not want to reference on this estimate, which are all the soft cost, escalation, contingencies, everything else. I include that in our budget form, and we're going to walk through that. So I think it's just important that we look at the hard cost, $95,888,600. So let's look at a budget form using, where that green arrow is pointing, the 95 million that we just talked about from the estimate. RIDE expects that hard cost to be 80% of the project, and they allow 20% for soft costs, and then there are other costs. When we run this calculation, and here you'll see that we think building demolition for both the high school and Curtis Corner is really more like 8.4 million to abate and demolish both of those facilities. So if you look at this, you have a project budget of 127 million. However, we anticipate sometimes that the hard cost, that 95 million, is maybe only 70% of the project, which means there's 30% in soft costs. This yields a project of 136 million. Now, RIDE would not allow us to move forward with a project based on 70-30, but in reality, I think it's closer to 70-30 instead of 80-20. So if we wanted to split the difference, and had our hard cost at 75% and our soft cost at 25%, you'd come to a project of about $131 million. So to Jim's point, we had a project at about $850 a square foot, one at about $900 a square foot. This one is about $880 a square foot. So, you know, what do you do when you're faced with this? So you have to manage the estimate, obviously, in the budget. So this bar chart is from the estimate we received. The reason why we like to do this is we want to look and see what areas of the building that you need to focus on to address the budget. You only have two ways. You either have to get more money, which is not likely going to happen, or you have to scale back the project or scale back components of the building, and you want to scale back the ones that are most impactful. For example, the structural steel package on this project, based on what has been designed just so far in the concept, is probably $11 million. The HVAC system is almost comparable to that at $11 million. Electrical, finishes, and you start to see what's really driving the cost of the estimate. This is where you'd want to focus your attention in the next phase. For example, you wouldn't worry about the sprinkler system, right? That's all the way down at the bottom. You need to focus on what the big ticket items are. So in blue are recent bids received for these trades from, for example, Rogers High School. And if you look at Rogers High School, that HVAC system was almost $13 million. We've only estimated about 11. Now, Rogers High School is bigger, and it has some significant HVAC systems associated with culinary, for example. So I wasn't too surprised to see that our HVAC system is a little less. But going down at plumbing, for example, the plumbing for Rogers High School is less than what we have estimated. If you look at fire suppression, it is less than what we have estimated. When I see this, it makes me feel pretty confident that the estimate we have is not too far off current market conditions. It's going to be, what are those other costs that will increase the total project cost? So if I had to offer some commentary, I believe we are within striking distance for the school and the fields. And in stage 3, that's a good time to transition the budgeting to the OPM. That would allow them to give you much more detail in those soft costs so that we know if it's an 80-20 split or a 70-30 split or a 75-25 split. While they're working on managing that budget, that allows then the design team to focus on recognizing efficiencies, where you're only going to be able to do that through space allocation, for example. You need to make the building a little smaller, maybe. So that relates to having some programming discussions with the high school. Are there areas that we can share space? Can we, instead of 900 square foot classrooms, can they be 825 square foot classrooms because we're using movable furniture and things like that? Coming up with a very efficient layout to the building in terms of the steel framing, that's huge. And then, of course, the MEP systems, which were the ones that were driving the cost estimate, relate to the square footage, the size of the building. So you're approaching it, I think you're within striking distance, number one. So I hope no one is panicking, because I'm not. But you are at a pivotal point where someone needs to start managing the budget in much more detail than what we typically do, and then allow the design team to try to contract and recognize more efficiencies to cut the square footage down, because That's the only way you're going to impact all the costs. I'll just go through the remaining, yes?
What contingency is the cost estimator carrying right now at this stage?
So let's go look at one of our project budgets in here. So in this project budget, this is the one at 7525, the project contingency and escalation we have put in here at 7%. Now, this is new construction, so you're not going to run into the unknowns as if you were trying to renovate, for example, the existing building. It's these soft costs where we have just these 5 categories. Your OPM is going to come back with like 20 categories to make sure you are covered on everything. And what they will quickly do is develop a budget, and then they'll pass it to the design team and say, this is what you have to work towards, instead of the other way around. The whole Stage 2 exercise is just to get you very close. What's different about this than other communities is that you've already recognized the need to go beyond what RIDE would have allowed, which was $100 million. You would have been in a very difficult situation in a year from now. So that's why I'm saying you are certainly within striking distance. You absolutely will be doing nothing more than the high school and some field work. And even then, depending upon how that project proceeds, field work may be limited or different than what we are anticipating today. There are a lot of factors. What's the economy going to look like in 18 months from now? No one knows. But I did want to let you know that we did receive the estimate. Certainly, it'll be part of the Stage 2. Their estimate came in at $126 million, but I think they're missing some major demolition costs, and they're not carrying all the soft costs that we have identified. That's why I said you only want to use the top part of their estimate, which was the hard cost. And of course, then, as I mentioned, when you transition into Stage 3, that's where a lot more detail at the soft costs will come out. And you'll basically then work towards a budget. So I know I laid a lot on you, so.
I appreciate it. I agree with you. I think we're within striking distance. I think their athletic field number is high, based on other site work. It's mostly a site work project.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know about the specialty of what they're putting in for track or what they're putting in for turf and things like that. But for general recontouring of the land, it's a very high number for a stadium-type project, in my opinion. So I think there's some savings there.
And again, keep in mind, the estimator is working off of a concept design. So there's only some, they have a limited amount of information. They're basing it off likely square foot, estimates. We did want to make sure that we have things like 8-lane synthetic track, synthetic turf field, stadium lighting, bleachers, the whole kit and caboodle is in there. For example, there's a $2 million stage and lighting package for the building. So we wanted to make sure everything is in there, and when the budget is established, you work towards that budget. And ideally, you hit the bigger categories first. The idea of a geothermal field is completely, in my opinion, right now, financially off the table. That would just add to this. They did not estimate, millions of dollars in well fields and everything else. So I was glad we were able to get some real data on recent HVAC costs from a comparable project.
We've got to get some outside funding, such as the Jim Manny grandstand. And, well, if we're starting with those pieces, the high school can be built. I mean, the numbers are clear that the high school can be built, even with the contingency, even with the other problems. It's really how much of that athletic facility gets built. And the baseline has to get built, but there's plenty of money. I'm very comfortable with these numbers.
I agree that at a very high level, when I saw all of this, I'm like, well, basically, the project contingency is at the field. I mean, that we're carrying $11 million. So even if the numbers come in higher, right, you'll still be able to build the building as we originally conceptualized it.
And if I had to pick one place that I think you'd get a lot of private charitable foundations and so forth contributing would be that, so.
I agree with that, but then also I think we need to make sure we also keep in mind the auditorium could also, that could be something that people would want to privately fund and invest. We have some big hitters that have come out of South Kingstown and gone on to Broadway. But so I don't want us to only think about athletics, because the theater program and the music program would pull in some charitable folks.
I know it doesn't change the top number or the total cost, but there is an opportunity, and this is probably a discussion for Brian and Jim and Luke, that reimbursement number from RIDE is expected to go above 594. So there would be more money coming in, be less of a percentage that the town, or less that the town would have to pay for that, less if the bonuses go up to that 20%. Again, doesn't change the top number, doesn't change the 125, but it's an internal discussion about how much debt we'd be taking on if there was other money within the town, also approved by the town council, school committee, et cetera. But like I said, I'm very comfortable we are within striking distance. You know, I've been at these kind of presentations where 150 million would have shown up, and then everybody just kind of puts their head on the table and walks away. We're there, and I appreciate what you did originally to prepare us for 125 and not 100. So thank you for that.
I think the important thing, and on Dave's point, we haven't raised the money to fund a bond yet, right? So 125 is our limit as far as a bonding capacity. We don't have money in the bank unless we take quote-unquote surplus, which is not, that's our cushion, right? But I think identifying a capital campaign early would be helpful for the community to assemble and say, okay, these are the components we'd be looking for. So I think it's important for the building committee to identify those very, very early in the stage 3 process, because we're gonna have to convey that and say, be very honest and say, these are likely not on the table. So if you want lights, you want an 8-lane track, if you want this bigger auditorium, we need to know now, because once we pour a foundation, that foundation is not gonna move to accommodate a bigger auditorium. So we're gonna have to really, and that's going to take community advocacy. So that's something we're going to have to really identify those key players. So Kate, you mentioned the theater program. Like, who in that would be that champion for that? If we were to, if we get through the referendum, who's the person?
I do think we need to be careful, though, that we're showing this as what I would like to call like a margin of excellence. Like the base structure is there. What we don't need is the community to come out and say, oh, look, they're already asking for more money. Well, we're not. But if you want the better track, the better field, the better auditorium, that's a margin of excellence above baseline.
True.
And that is what we think, that's where we should ask the community support. They've already, if they approve the bond, will fund a high school and a athletic facility. But if we really want it at the level that we've been saying we want it at, that's where you have to convey that. But we've got to be really careful that we don't get people thinking we're just putting our hands out already.
That's a good point. Phil, are you done with your presentation?
Yes.
I want to kick this over to...
Yes.
I was going to say, too, between the OPM and then this committee, not at this stage, but as we go forward, between all the kind of incentive programs that are out there that the OPM could look into and file, and we can also, but also grants, and then other districts. I know there's one in Massachusetts where, again, this is jumping a lot of steps ahead, but I think it was Comcast built a whole TV station inside of a high school, funded completely through Comcast. They have their heirs go in and teach classes in that high school, and it was like $1 million TV studio built into a high school for free by Comcast. So, opportunity like that might come along. If the URI wants to build a Rams Junior stadium for us, they're more than welcome. Please.
the Jade Studio Architectural Incubator.
There you go, Phil. Phil, I do have a question. So we talked about the high school, and there are other projects going in here, right? Can you explain briefly, because there's numbers in there for Matunic, Peacedale, West Kingston,
Yeah.
what those projects are? I'm assuming they're in line with what we've already spoken about, but just so everyone's clear, because the stage 2 includes all this, and we all know that those projects are not going to be in this phase, but if more money comes down in the form of grants or state, whatever, wherever we get monies in housing aid.
So, within part 1, there is a section that starts to identify, well, within part 1 is the deferred maintenance reports of your facilities. And some time ago, Brian and I had met at the administration building to look at this deferred maintenance list to see what projects we should identify in the stage 2, so that if something were to happen, you would be eligible for reimbursement if Brian and the school or town went ahead and did the work. So we identified work at Broad Rock, at Peacedale. For example, it talks about doing some exterior masonry work, talks about upgrading the fire alarm system, replacing roof areas, replacing wood doors. So things like that we want to at least make eligible for reimbursement. You do not have any life safety issues, right? This is just proper maintenance of your facilities, and this would stay in effect for 5 years. And then you'd have another 5-year plan, and if anything here was done or not done, it would carry over or come off. So we identified scopes of work that when we were all done, total $25 million. We picked that cap of $25 million because we felt that it was manageable. It addressed enough items, at least a dozen items at each school, if not more, that would be eligible for reimbursement.
Phil, you've mentioned before they usually give you a one-time scope shift, right, if you have to. Let's say we build the high school, we're on target, rec field, everything's good. We get to the end of that project. 2 years down the road, we decide Peacedale needs something that's not necessarily on the original list. Would they consider a scope change for that? Let's say we need a new, I don't know, communication system, and it wasn't in our stage 2 originally. Is that considered a scope shift if we didn't include it in the first place?
So you're going to receive an MOA that identifies dollar amounts at each school building. And if they accept our stage 2 as we submit it, even though we're going to change the field from 8 million to 11 million, it'll total about 136 million. That 136 million, this is now for the MOA, for what's ride reimbursement, would be identified at each school. You can shift money from one school to the next if you have reason to do so. You can always ask for an emergency project if it's not on the list. But these lists that the buildings, hazard included, are general enough that I can't anticipate you wanting to do something that I cannot point to having identified.
That's really what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
You know, I think the goal here is to keep it as broad as possible so that way we have options.
Yes.
All right, perfect. Other questions from the committee on the stage 2? All right, and then other components of the stage 2, just so we're clear on what needs to be submitted with the full package, broad base. I know there's community background, that's all boilerplate. What other things might be specific? You incorporate the cost estimate that we've received. Anything else that we should be aware of?
The only thing that I'm trying to track down and I've reached out to RIDE separately, is any comments from the stage 1. That's really the only thing open on our end, are to respond to any comments from the stage one.
Dave?
Thank you, Phil. I did have one question I'm bringing back from Monday's Recreation Commission meeting. I gave them an update on the project and both sites, and they're very favorable overall. The only question that came up with, when I talked about the future field house for the athletic fields, they wanted to make sure that there were bathrooms in the base plan. I assume you incorporated those, but just wanted to confirm that.
So in the base plan, if you're looking for any bathroom facilities, they are either portable or coming out of the administration building. So I want to make sure everyone's clear with that. They're either portable or coming out of the administration building. To give you the space that you want, you will want that field house for a variety of reasons in the future. For storage, for concessions, for team rooms, restrooms, et cetera.
Thanks for the clarification.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it. So we had talked last time about the committee. We're obviously, we're moving along with the stage 2, town council, the first meeting in July. We're planning to bring it to the town council, and I know that we were going to figure out a date for the school committee to consider likely after that. Kate?
So my first question is, on this particular agenda, were we not going to be voting as to whether or not to move this to?
I'm getting there.
I just don't see it on our agenda.
So presentation by Studio J, submission for discussion and action.
All right,
Yeah.
sorry.
So
And then, in regards to school committee, when you sent this to us, you sent it to all, town council, school committee, school building committee. We're actually going to be having a school committee meeting this coming Tuesday,
oh, okay.
which is the 27th? The 27th. And
Tuesday or Thursday? Oh, yeah.
it's going to be a large, it's ultimately going to be a large agenda, but it initially was created with the intent of voting on this. So this is going to be one of the topics on the agenda if it is approved if the recommendation to submit is approved by our group. The intent was on Tuesday to have the school committee vote. Because we're running out of.
Would you be available the 27th to be able to go over it? I like that answer.
He's turning red, though.
It'll be a long.
You don't have to, it's going to be.
Sure you want to do it the same night?
Can I
We're
request
ready-
that it be put to the early in the agenda?
Early, don't make.
Well, no, it would be the first item.
Okay.
Because that's the intent of the meeting in
Be
the first
helpful.
place, and things are,
right.
the problem comes in is if you go into July, you lose the first week because it's the week of the 4th. And then that puts us in either the 10th or the 17th, and it starts pushing us further and further into July. And people go on vacation, and plans have been made, and this, that, and the other thing. The 27th is an intentional meeting, and I think it makes sense.
I think it sounds good to us. The earlier the better. There's no sequential difference, so if we
And I
can get
apologize,
through.
Phil, that we've just had some things come up lately, so we have to have a meeting on the 27th, and July just is difficult.
So I did share the draft with town council and school
So
committee
they've seen
already.
it,
So
and
they've
I'm going to
seen it.
remind them that they've seen it, and that they need to actually look at it.
Right.
So,
If there's any revisions, we could distribute it prior to, if you want, or if you can. I don't know if there's going to be any revisions.
to 11. Yep.
Yeah. All right, so I mean, if we can get the updated, that's helpful, and then we'll, send it out, and I mean, it's coming quick, so
If
do
it's,
what you can.
if it's a problem for you to be there, and I know you said you could be there, but if it's a problem, they could always watch this meeting ahead of time. So we can work on it.
Let's discuss.
Well, has your team already reviewed that cost estimate for the fields? Has your team reviewed that cost estimate for the fields? For the fields? Okay. Right. Okay.
All right, so we'll plan, the school committee will be on the 27th, the council will be the 10th, which means that we can submit anytime after that. So with that, does anybody have any other questions, concerns on the stage 2 submittal? No? Chip, did you have something? No? You good? All right, so with that, I'll call for a motion to recommend the submittal of the South Kingstown School Building Project Stage 2 report document to the Rhode Island Department of Education as presented by Studio Jade, and further recommend that the town council and school committee execute any documents necessary to effectuate the submission of relevant application materials.
So moved.
Thank you, Kate.
Second?
Thank you, Dave. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Perfect. So, if you're all clear, step 1 is done. We have 2 more steps. We'll be moving to the school committee. Excellent. You've already gone over the preliminary cost estimate. Did you have anything else? Because that was the second thing on the agenda, but you merged basically 5 and 6. Nothing else? Okay, perfect. Any last thoughts on the cost estimate? I know, Dave, you already got yours on the, okay, good. Perfect. There is no public here, so there is no public comment. So we'll go into scheduling of next meeting. So I know that we purposely had this meeting because there was a lot of things stacking up for everyone. I don't see a reason necessarily to have anything before the town council votes on this. I think maybe we clear the deck before we get back together. Does that sound reasonable? So I'm looking at the schedule.
I think we had talked early August was when we were last time.
Bill, I'm going to point to you. Is there any reason that we would, beyond, I guess, talking about communication strategy or whatever, but after the stage 2 in July, that you would need to see us? Okay.
What
So-
about the OPM? Would they need to be brought in? Like, would we want to meet with them? I'm not pushing for a meeting. I'm just making sure we're dotting our i's and crossing our t's, so.
So maybe what we can do is, in the meeting tomorrow, we can talk to Chris Spiegel and just say, is your envisionment? If we need to call a meeting in July, we will, but we'll leave it open for now. And we'll just get in touch with everybody in the next meeting. We're going to assume it's the first Thursday in August for now, and then we'll roll from there. Fair enough? All right, good. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make that motion.
Thank you, Chip.
Second.
Thank you, Kate. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Have a good night, everyone.
August 3rd.